Hello and good evening, everybody. Today I'm speaking to Lars Schernikau. He's a renewable expert. He's an investor in particularly the core industry, and he's been lively. He's been in a part of the lively debate regarding the energy transition. Yeah, today, Lars, I'd like to welcome you.
Thank you. Pleasure to see you, Hugo.
Yeah. So I put a title of this conversation as "What is Dunkelflaute?" Can you maybe explain that to the audience and why it is such a critical starting point and such a contested a phenomenon in this whole energy transition debate?
Well, yes, actually, so Dunkelflaute is a German word, and I'm German myself. So Dunkel means dark, and Flaute means without wind, yeah, windless. So it's just a combination of basically dark times when there's no wind, and that's of course very relevant in the aspect of the energy transition, as it appears that we're mostly transitioning towards wind and solar, or so we're supposed to. And of course, when there's such periods of Dunkelflaute, which means no sun and no wind, then there's a problem.
So let me ask you this: how long does this occur? For how many hours or days do we have periods of just no wind? I suppose the wind is a bigger problem than the sun in this case.
Well, actually, I wouldn't say that. So, of course, the more you are in the north or the south of the world, of course, this Dunkelflaute issue becomes a bigger issue. It appears to become a bigger issue, but actually, it's a problem around the world. So, me being mostly in Europe, you can say that every night is dark, right? So, every night that's without wind is a Dunkelflaute. And that happens a lot. Now, of course, the most critical periods are during the winter months in the north or in the south, wherever you are, where there is very little sun. And then there are sometimes periods of days, weeks, even a month of very little wind. So there has been some analysis done by various researchers, and I think the 96, 97 winter in Europe was one of the worst. And based on that, the researchers recommended, I think, 3 months of backup capacity to get through the really bad times, because as it happens that often the weather is correlated along or across large geographical areas. So when there's no wind in the UK, there also happens to be very little or no wind in northern Germany. And when it's when you have a bad a weather area with with large covers, cloud covers across Europe, then it's large areas without sun. So the theory of sort of, okay, if the sun doesn't shine there, the sun shines somewhere else. It's true in theory, but practically, it's not pragmatically relevant.
So the phenomenon is the wind drops all over Europe. There's probably some wind, but it's just very low. There's a lack of capacity on the grid, and then the question is obviously what during that period, right?
Exactly. So the key issue, and I guess the key issue for me when I speak about renewable energy, of course, nobody is against technology, progress, renewable things. I mean, of course, we all want to do everything in our power to reduce the environmental impact of our energy systems. And I'm just have a problem with the general belief or the sort of the way that we are all going to move away from conventional fuels towards wind and solar. I'm saying no, you will not be able to. And the fact is that for every solar panel, you need a backup. For every windmill, you need a backup. That means you always have at least double installed capacity. You have your solar panel, and on top of that, you have something that provides the backup when the sun doesn't shine, something else. Usually, you actually have two things, not one, but two things, right? So you have the solar panel, and you may have a battery for short-term backup, and then you have a idle gas power station for long-term energy storage or for long-term backup, or in the future, they're talking about hydrogen. So in fact, you have three installed capacities to replace, let's say, one coal-fired power station or gas-fired power station.
Okay, so I want to sort of backtrack and throw at you the renewable arguments because their argument has always been, from what I heard, you only need 4 hours of storage, right? And you're saying, well, no, these periods last for days, sometimes at hours at least. That's not true, right? So let's start there. You don't just need 4 hours storage; you need much more than that. So do
No,
you have a
you
number?
need weeks and months. You need no. I don't have a month. I don't have a number. If you think about, you want to build a system that's reliable all the time. And now,
Right.
what's reliability mean, right? So 99.99% over a 50-year period, I don't know, 99.9%. So of course, depends on how long you look in history. You have to basically you always look at the worst days and months and weeks, not the best days and months and weeks. That's the first fallacy what people do. They show you these beautiful curves, we reach 99% renewable, but it's not relevant. What's relevant, show me the worst, which is now in Europe, last week, right? Snow everywhere, cold, no wind. That's the worst. And when it lasts, when the wind sticks, it stays cold. When the sun sticks and remains cold, the solar panels are all going to be covered, even if it was sunny. So the fact that this 4-hour argument is completely, it's unscientific. It doesn't make any sense. Think about it. South Africa is probably one of the regions with the best sunshine in the world, right? You have California, South Africa, you have Australia, those three main areas, and then probably only after that comes the Sahara, in my view. But even in South Africa, your natural capacity factor of solar availability is probably 25, 28%.
It's 25, yes.
Because it's 25%. That means in theory, you overbuild 4 times to replace, let's say, a gas-fired or coal-fired power station. But it's not true, because if you overbuild 4 times, only then would you, in theory, have enough energy during the day to then basically somehow get overnight, right? But now when you just have 2 days to take care of, because South Africa also rains and also snows, we've seen that, right? So when you just have 2 days, it suddenly becomes 8 times. 10 days becomes 40 times overbuild, right? And then on top of that, you have the storage losses, if you talk about storage, because storage always costs energy, right?
Okay, so I've now read articles in The Guardian that talked about this phenomenon. So I'm trying to, throw all the arguments at you. And they say, but you can have demand-side management. You can just switch off stuff. You can have, limit people's fridges, for example, things of that sort. I mean, what do you say to that?
So I think the demand-side argument is an important one. Actually, it's not completely without merit. So I do believe that there is ways to optimize our, in this case, electricity demand further, right? Because sometimes we are wasting electricity, we are wasting what we're doing. And I think to reduce that waste, you can manage demand better. No question about that. My argument is that it doesn't matter how much you improve that demand side, as long as we should improve, it will not solve the issue. We need to always have electricity on demand. So as you always say, Hügo, electricity is not kilowatt hours, electricity is a service, right? And that service needs to be provided, needs to be available, independent of you managing demand and optimizing demand, which you should. I'm fully in favor of that.
Yes, and I make the argument, and I'll get your view on this, the cost of your service is driven by the cost of your emergency fuel, which would be your backup, your battery cost, or natural gas, I guess.
Yeah, or the coal-fired power station. So, I mean, just think about so I always, when people tell me in Europe, so hold on, but it cannot be bad if I now build a new house, I put a solar panel on my house. I'm like, actually, you know what? It is bad. Because an additional solar panel does what? It gives me the solar electricity at the time that everybody else has solar electricity, right? So that means actually the value of this additional solar panel is less than the previous solar panel because you already have so many. So the more solar panels you have, the less value you have. On top of that, actually every additional solar panel will reduce the utilization of the gas or coal-fired power station as a backup. That means your cost goes up because you're using that backup now less. You still need it, but you're using it less. So that means your total cost goes up. And that's why it's actually bad. It's not good. And what happens to the gas or coal-fired power station which doesn't run optimally if it always turns on and off? I mean, you know what happens with a car. You turn on and off, and rather than go straight at 100 kilometers an hour, right? So the efficiency goes down. So who pays for all these things, right?
So I look at Germany's installed capacity. It's about 200 gigawatt, more or less, 220, something like that. And I would say, okay, 220 times, let's say 10 hours when no wind, okay, which is not unreasonable. That's, 200 times 10. Okay, that's 2,000 gigawatt hour. And then you look at the price of a battery and you quickly come to something that is, quarter to the same size of the German economy. I mean, is this even possible to replace, financially?
No, of course, it's not only financially not possible, it's also, I mean, from a pure material point of view, not possible. We don't have enough capacity to produce the raw materials, nor to refine the raw materials required for all this capacity. So it is not possible. And it's not desirable from an environmental point of view either, because as I'm saying, everything you do always has an impact on the environment, including, of course, our coal-fired power stations. They also have an impact on the environment. But everything else you do also does. It may be different, but if you then try to replace something that you consider bad with something that's worse, then you have a problem. And that's why we argue always, look at the whole world, the whole life cycle, the whole system, and look at the plus and minuses. And it's not always simple and easy. And it's not always that this is bad, this is good. Usually everything has its issue and everything is bad in a way, but everything is also good because, you know, having energy available to us, as you know, South Africa has a big value. And especially when you guys are sitting in the dark, you know, with load shedding.
Yes. So I want to get into the metrics of this stuff because this is always disputed. You have the levelized cost that we know you cannot compare dispatchable with non-dispatchable intermittent sources, for example. And I think everyone agrees on that right now. And then there's other metrics being thrown around. Oh, not all, but some people. You have the full cost of electricity that you're quite famous for when you were saying this. And then other people saying, no, but look, we've got the value adjusted cost, which the AOECD does. You've got all these other type of cost. And now the latest one is the full system cost that I've heard. Okay, or total
system cost. Yeah.
Total system cost. Do you have like a sense of when we're going to come to an agreement? Like, how do we price this stuff?
No, I don't think so. And I think, look, it is complex and it changes depending on where you are in terms of penetration of different systems, as well as regional where you are. So there's so many aspects. It becomes very, very complex, and maybe somebody comes with something up with something that are very, very smart. But I don't think that's the question. The reason why I wrote a paper on the full cost of electricity is really to make people think we have to move away from this marginal cost view, which worked in the past, this levelized cost view, which worked in the past, where we were comparing coal with nuclear and with gas. And even then it wasn't fair because you cannot compare the levelized cost of a nuclear to a coal-fired power station because they're not quite the same, right? They are a little bit different. But now it becomes completely different. So we have to look at the system cost, so the total system cost, full cost of electricity, whatever you call it. And that, of course, all these definitions they have include different things. But my definition was just simply, look, just include everything. In the end, what is the cost of making that kilowatt hour available on demand around the clock with a certain reliability? And that's the cost. So I just had an interview here in Europe, and they were asking me, yeah, but we have this big new project there. What do you think about it? I'm like, what do you think would this cost if this wind farm you're talking about would have to securely or guarantee 20 years of a certain, electricity to the system? What do you think would it cost? It would immediately be bankrupt. And that's why, by the way, we have all these problems of these large solar and wind operators, because they cannot compete in the market without subsidies. It's a fact of life. It's pure economics. Nothing to do with anything else what you think about the environment. It cannot work.
Yeah, the wind in particular, I'm skeptical of, especially offshore wind, because I have not seen levelized cost of any of them that convinces me. Just levelized cost. I mean, we're not even getting to your metrics. That convinces me that they have a sensible business case without subsidies. But get your view on this. How would one? I mean, because it sounds to me like we have a regulatory failure. We're selling in this marginal cost thing, and then when the wind blows strong, of course they're cheap and they win and they beat everyone else. And then when it isn't strong, we have to ramp up the emergency supply, which is sort of what's happening. How would you change like the incentive structure then to at least settle this debate? Because it feels to me, okay, we don't agree, but we need the rules to be established so that it will optimize for the best performance.
Look, I'm not a power system sort of specialist, but just purely looking at this from a step back, there was a reason why electricity supply, just talking electricity right now, was centralized, right? So because it is a central function which is not easily taken care of in a decentralized way. So in Germany, it was decentralized, I don't know, 25 years ago. I forgot how long ago, but some time ago. And back then, before the decentralization, the Stadtwerke, the local power plant operators, they had a legal responsibility to provide security of power to its people. That was taken away. Today, you have privately owned power plants, and they optimize their income. They are playing the markets, sell, buy, keep back, up and down. But there's no responsibility anymore to provide energy security. There are network agencies, whatever you call them in different countries, which kind of play that role. They're trying to listen. I do not allow you to turn off this power plant because we need it now. So some sort of legislation which tries to keep some of the system running. But the fact is there's no more responsibility with the actual producers or generators of electricity to provide it. So I think the argument has to really, or the discussion has to start again. Listen, do we want a decentralized or a centralized system when it comes to providing electricity to our people? And that is a tough argument in many cases. You can say, especially South Africa, all about what it means to be centralized, right? But look at Vietnam, how well it's working there. These are growing nations which are big centralized, and they have proper planning in place. So there is arguments on both sides. And again, right now in many countries we are in a decentralized world, and it's becoming even worse, more decentralized. Or we talk to, in the future everybody produces their own power on their balcony. I'm like, for Christ's sake, are you kidding me, right? And no. So the cost goes through the roof. Everything is possible. You just give me energy and money and resources, raw materials, right? And I'll build you anything you want, including a solar and wind-based economy. It's just going to be ridiculously expensive.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. I mean, look, my view on central decentralized has been pragmatism. I am not a communist with a red hat. I am not a Frederick Hayek guy or whatever. I've read both arguments. I understand the arguments in favor and against it. My argument's a question of pragmatism. If South Africa has, I think, 80% of our energy from coal, something like that, electricity from coal, if you're just going to decentralize and walk away from Eskom at the moment, people don't want to hear the argument, but that's not going to produce a wind and solar paradise, right? It's you have to be cautious with these things.
Yeah, I mean, of course, in South Africa, the situation is right now so detrimentally bad, right? That in a way anything seems to be better. But the fact is that, in my view, when you have especially like in South Africa, you have to rely on your own resources, which are cheap, abundant, and South Africa used to be on top of the world when it comes to reliability, right? I mean, look a few decades back. I mean, it's amazing what South Africa did and how well it was running, how low cost it was doing. So I think the case is there that the centralized system can work very well. I caution people for decentralized electricity systems. I've seen what it has done to Germany. It's one of the issues that Germany has today, because there's nobody really taking responsibility for it. And you have all these private companies funded by whoever building up these power plants, solar power plants, wind power plants. And now the people are incentivized to put up their own power plant on their balcony, and then put a couple of batteries in their garage if they have a garage. They're lucky, right? And then go ahead. I mean, it's getting into an energy economic wasteland, because all of this decentralization always means you're wasting more energy. You see, energy is all about, the first law of thermodynamics, that energy is never lost. Second law of thermodynamics, that actually energy has a tendency to dissipate, right? Entropy increases. So that means the more decentralized you become, the more you will lose, the more will go away. The more centralized you become, the more you have an opportunity to reduce those losses, right? As you do in centralized grids and centralized large power plants and all those things, right? That's why we don't have small power plants. We have large ones, because they are optimizing the entropy gain, basically, right? So it's incredible.
But isn't part of this debate then, I mean, an argument? I mean, historically, before, as you say, the deregulation period that started, as far as I know, in the 1990s or the 70s in America, we had nationalized utilities, as you say, which were building these things. And now we were told for a very long time to walk away from them. But we stopped building dams, we stopped building nuclear plants, and I argue we even stopped building coal plants in many countries in the world, right? And we're going smaller, as you say, okay, which is fine, it's markets, we understand that thing. And your argument, if I understand it correctly, is we're going too far in that direction, right? There needs to be a little bit of a pivot back to that to just get to a little bit of energy realism.
It urgently needs to go back, because in the end, what are we trying to do? I keep repeating, we're trying to reduce the environmental impact of our energy systems. That's what we're trying to do, right? I mean, at the same time, we need to have reliable, affordable electricity in this case, right? And by going decentralized the way we are, and less, it has sort of the liberalized electricity systems, we are wasting energy, which is already scarce. We're already in a scarcity worldwide, right? Because of insufficient investments on various sides, including on power plants. So we're already in a generally scarce, energy scarce environment. The world is still growing, and yet the energy supply is having trouble keeping up because there's not sufficient investment. And by doing that, we're now, whatever little we have, we're decentralizing further. We're actually increasing our energy losses. So we're making the situation worse. So I come purely from this, not purely, but I come from this energy side, energy loss point of view. Decentralized systems means higher losses. And those losses will go do what? Where do they go? They all go into the atmosphere, warming our atmosphere. Actually, it contributes to warming, right? If you have inefficient power plants, inefficient power systems, you are warming the atmosphere more than with an efficient power system.
Right. Okay, no, that's fair enough. But now I sort of want to throw another question at you, which is solar panels are now here, at least. They scale incredibly fast. People are putting on their roof and they feel that they're off grid. Though we know they're real batteries, actually, ESCOM or whatever the German equivalent might be, or EDF in France. And we're seeing utility death spirals. I mean, how would one, sort of similar to the previous question I guys here, but like, how would one now accommodate this new technology? Because clearly they must have some business case. I mean, it's not that if I understand it correctly, you're not totally against them. It's just they must find their right place in the mix.
Well, I would go now as far that I really do not support solar or wind at grid scale. So I do think it's bad for the environment and the economy to have wind and solar at grid scale. Now there are applications where wind and solar may make sense. So for instance, if I have a village in Africa that has nothing right now, right, and I put some solar panels there and a couple of batteries, now at least they have something, right? And they may not get through 2 weeks of darkness, but at least they have something which they didn't have before. Of course, that's beneficial. But as soon as they want to actually step up and become industrialized, that's not going to do it anymore. So I am really at this point not supporting wind and solar at grid scale at all. Mm-hmm. And that's of course an unpopular message, which is of course also explained in my book, The Unpopular Truth. But it's a pure energy economic fact. So what the question is, what do we do? Well, I always say, look, whatever has happened out there, we're not going to change right now. I mean, all these guys, there's a lot of money out there. But I first take a step back, guys. First, start to realize what you're doing is increasing the cost of electricity, the cost of energy. And that fact has not reached our leaders. That fact has not reached our industrial leaders, our educators. So once people understand it's getting more expensive, then you can take the next step, right? And then you can take next step. Okay, so what are the implications of having more expensive energy? There's a geopolitical, and then of course there's a local, a social implication. Do you want to have a system that's becoming more expensive? Then people say yes, because otherwise, we're all going to go under. And then of course I question that one, right? But I don't think it can be the goal to become more wasteful and more expensive in our energy supply. I just don't believe that is right. So in a way, whatever my thought process has gone through in the past years, I would like for people to slowly see why I've come to this kind of unpopular conclusion. Yeah. So
well, I mean,
it starts with the cost. Yeah.
I came to a similar conclusion as you. I mean, I'm pretty much a cost economics person. I say if it works, it works. And I mean, part of this issue is the cost of carbon, the cost to the environment. We don't know how to price it. We don't know what the actual value is. So we just, assume the cost is infinite, right? I mean, how would you, let me ask you that one? I mean, it's now COP28. How would you sort of accommodate the environmentalists and to say, look, I mean, your argument, I guess, is we're not going to stop fossil fuel expansion anyways. The rest of the world doesn't care about it, but they want some accommodation with that. I mean, where's the sweet spot?
Look, I mean, as soon as you start to argue the economic aspect with environmentalists, they say, no, there is no cost to it, right? It's basically, as you say, it's infinitive, right? I mean, and it's not really the case, right? But again, neither you nor I are not suggesting that we shouldn't care about our environment. Trust me, we're not. So in fact, my honest belief is that by going this wind and solar plus some backup system, hydrogen, batteries, whatever, actually we make the environment worse, right? The cost of carbon, there's many calculations. Most of them have detrimental, wrong assumptions. When you look at those models, they're using, I mean, really, really wrong, completely unrealistic assumptions, at least the ones that I've seen. And they're completely missing out the counter side, which is the positive side of having reliable, affordable energy, number one, and the positive side of having, in this case, also additional CO2 in the atmosphere. There is also a positive side to it, right, which comes from the greening, and fertilization has also been proven is not in dispute anymore. So when you actually start to have that discussion, and I mean, Professor Nordhaus won the Nobel Prize for this, for Christ's sake, in 2019 or 18, whatever it was. He won the Nobel Prize for the first one to actually try to find an optimal path using, in my view, wrong assumptions. But even there, he made an optimal path of, I think, 3.5 degrees of warming. And now we're already at 2.5 degrees of warming only since 1852. It's actually below already his optimal path. And yet everybody is getting worse. So no, for me, what it takes to do a positive difference to our environment is to invest, not take money away, to invest, to clean up, to increase efficiencies, right? To improve technologies. And there's so much. I mean, imagine we have 2 terawatt hours of installed coal capacity worldwide. Imagine if we would just improve the efficiency by 1% of those power plants. I mean, imagine what we can do and how little it would cost.
And so you're in favor, though. I mean, it's debate in South Africa. My debate has been in papers, and I've gotten attacked for this. Is South Africa's first priority is fix the coal before we do anything
Absolutely.
else, right? I mean,
absolutely. We have to fix the coal. 100%. You have to fix the power plants. You have to fix the logistics chains, the system. I mean, that is where the priority is the cheapest, with the highest environmental and economic impact. There's no question about it. And when you think about this triangle of energy, right? It's reliability, affordability, and then environmental protection. So if you don't have reliable energy, you cannot talk about if it's affordable or not. First, you need to have it reliable. Then you make it affordable, and then you can optimize it for environmental protection. But right now, we're starting here, or at least with one component of this, and we're forgetting about everything else. So basically, we're optimizing here, or trying to optimize here, actually not optimizing, and at the cost of this and this, right? So we're actually making things worse.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Yeah, I've got this is the final question for you on nuclear power. That is now finally hitting COP28. Countries have pledged to triple it. I mean, how do you square the nuclear versus coal debate? Because my understanding is coal is still more affordable than nuclear in many cases in many parts in the world.
Yeah, so I think when you look at some of these LCOE analyses are actually quite useful. So when you look at Bloomberg's or BNEF's levelized cost of electricity analysis from this year, the cheapest is coal, then gas, and then nuclear, right? And then when you actually consider wind and solar plus the necessary backup and storage, and actually it's far, far higher, even as per them, right? So nuclear is definitely significantly more expensive than coal and gas. I don't know if it's 2 or 3 or 4 times, I don't know, whatever it is. But nuclear, in my view, is the most efficient way of generating electricity. I'm sorry, it's just incredibly efficient. So we should do everything we can, as long as we can afford it, because it is more expensive, right? To invest in nuclear power stations for that base load, because they are environmentally, economically, and energy economically ridiculously efficient, right? But it will not be enough. So we will need coal and we will need gas, and we will need hydro. Whatever we can give me in hydro, give it to me. We may also need geothermal, right, wherever it makes sense. But I don't think that we can live without thermal power generation, which is 60% is coal and gas. Globally, 60% is coal and gas. And if you do not invest in that, in both, we're going to have a problem.
That's a very important point. Well, Lars, I'd like to thank you very much for this conversation. Is there anything last you would like, just a message you felt we haven't dealt with, you'd like to communicate and before wrap up?
No, thank you. I mean, I think it's important to have these conversations. I appreciate, Hügo, also you taking your personal time and getting this conversation out there and having, honest discussions. And again, not everybody has to agree with what you or I say, but it's important to have this discussion in a dispassionate way and say, listen, guys, let's take a step back. What are we doing, right? And what's actually, where are we trying to go? And by the decisions that are being made by, basically saying, I mean, in COP now, how many leaders have said immediately stop coal, oil, and gas? I mean, I don't know what to say. I mean, luckily, the president of COP28 dared to say in this interview, I think over the weekend, that's completely unscientific. Actually, it is unscientific. Yeah?
What gets me about this is this geopolitical standoff between the Western or the democratic countries, if you will, and the democracies in the developing world. South Africa's democracy, Indonesia is certainly democracy. All these countries, India, developing world, we're just not going to go along with this. We've got people to feed before we will get to the point where you are at the moment, okay, in Germany and these places. and it forces us in this ugly corner where we have to choose China and Russia over you. I mean, seriously, like I don't think they want that. But that's
But do you think Germany is doing the right thing? I mean, as a South African, do you think Germany is doing the right thing?
no. I mean, the Germany is the butt of all jokes in South Africa's energy sector at the moment.
It's
Like
a butt of all
whenever
jokes in
Germany
most
burns coal,
countries.
we're like asking, where does it come from? Oh, South Africa. You tell us, and then Germany gives us money to walk away from it, and we look at it and we're like, next door is France with nuclear. Okay, yes, I studied in France, so maybe I'm biased to that. And we're like, why don't we do that? Oh, because there's no money to steal for the private sector in nuclear. Now we understand why. So it's sort of the arguments not coming forth. But at the moment in South Africa, this is my suspicion. Doesn't matter which government gets elected next year, we're gonna burn coal. I'm sorry, guys.
We have to, and that means what? We have to invest in it.
Yes.
Right? To make it cleaner and better and more efficient. That's the solution. Very simple. It's the cheapest and best and cleanest solution. The technology is out there. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, I hope the people start waking up, and I will not move away from my firm stand of what I think is economically, environmentally correct. Luckily, I can say these things, and you can as well, right? We are independent, but if you are employed at a certain organization, you may not be able to say these things that we say because it's not, along the party line. I mean, it's sad that it's come this far.
It is, but I think the bubble will burst. Anyways, Lars, thank you very much for this chat, and please continue to do what you do. And people, please follow him on his website and look at his interview with Tom Nelson. It was very insightful. Thank you very much, Lars.
Thank you. Appreciate it.